Battery didn't charge. Great. This is Germantown, another one of these decision games, mini games. I got a bunch of these. I got more full magazine games, but I feel like, these are kind of smaller. I'm in the middle of playing Avec Infini Regret, which I'm like, okay, as pause between scenarios, let's do this as kind of a little break. This one is the Musket and Saber. Apparently it's a series. I don't know how many were made. This particular one was made in 2015, so there's been a few years it may have been popular. I'm not sure that they're all mini games. The rules seem to imply that there's larger games with a little bit more rules in them. The rules are quite short, just 4 pages of regular rules, and then that work with the system for the mini games, and are probably pretty similar to the normal game, and then a couple of pages for the main game. On the back of the main game, for the particular scenario. On the back of the scenario thing, we've got some charts, the combat result table, which isn't anywhere else. It's kind of a pity. I don't know what double printing costs. They did it on this, but not on this. It would have been useful to put some charts on there. I think it's the paper itself that's the expensive thing, but I'm not sure. Full color and all that. Obviously they're trying to save space on the map stock, so whatever. This should work fine. And you've got the explicit rules for the scenario in here. This is meant to handle pretty much, they say pre-Napoleonic. I don't know if the system would work well for anything before, I don't know, say War of Austrian Succession or something like that, but it might work earlier than that. We've got a few different kind of things. We've got normal units. An interesting design choice here. So the infantry are put in line. You have a combat factor, a morale factor in the center, a movement factor here. Artillery, we've got one here. This is attack and defense, morale, movement, and then firing range here. The letter up here, all the continental forces, the dirty rebels, have some kind of command restriction on them. So we've got command number 1 here, 2 here, etc. The loyalist units, which are mainly British regulars, but there's some Hessians, and there is actually a Tory unit under there as well, are all, I guess, just one big formation that anyone can command and use. The limitation on these formations is really a matter of the leaders that can affect them are indicated by the formation. There doesn't seem to be anything else. So the fact that, setup rules, the fact that this is formation 1, it doesn't have a leader. However, the A's indicate their army leader, or army formation. Only Washington could command the artillery, but then again, he's the only person who can command these two, so that's okay. But it needs the A there because otherwise one of these leaders maybe would get confused or something. Got some reinforcements here. This is, I have I don't have any historical information on this particularly, but this is in the Philadelphia campaign. I got a couple of games on that. I've got, boxed-wise, I have something that I really meant to get to because a guy on BGG who really liked it. Over here, which is the Philadelphia campaign itself, and I have Germantown in the Battles of the American Revolution series. This may convince me to go back and play the games of that I hadn't finished. I kind of stopped because later in the series they started printing games that I'm just not so sure that I'm that excited about. I was really excited about, Saratoga and stuff like that. But I think I did a couple of them, and I liked the system, but maybe not enough to be, handling Indians, ambush forces in the woods type of thing. Like I said, my battery is dying out here. The goal in this game, the Continental Forces want to essentially do one of a couple of things. They either want to make it to the market square here by the end of the game, or to one of the British camps, which are this line here. All the British leaders are sitting here in the tavern, living the good life, but the Continentals are coming in here at 5 in the morning. It's going to be foggy, automatically actually. And we'll start going over the rules. I'm, gonna need to obviously switch batteries, so it's not that big a deal what goes on there. All right, and we'll take a look at what the two sets of rules have. I don't think I have anything else in this series. The only other one that was in existence at the time of this printing was Saratoga, but yeah, I thought it would be fun to play this one. I've already clipped and stored a couple of these mini games away. They're really kind of handy as, like, I don't know what to call them. Little in between other games, little breaks. Roll, however, there's kind of a negative to that, which is, although the rules are short, they're a little odd. They don't feel like what I'm used to in games. They have, I don't know, not particularly, odd concepts in play or whatever, but they're not feeling like, the old SPI stuff. I kind of expect when I pull one of these out, and I've been pleasantly surprised that they're not, to find something that's based on the old Napoleon at Waterloo type design, And it's just so nice to see something that's a little richer than that, a little different than that, but on the other hand, there's not a lot of rules, and sometimes I'm feeling myself not really fully comprehending what it's all about. They say to have a few D6. I actually think one is enough. For combat, you're going to be rolling 1d6 for attack and 1d6 then for a possible morale check, and you might roll them both at once. If you really want to save time, I'm not really that concerned about that, but it's not like it's not like the CWB system where you got to roll like 6 different dice or whatever. Okay, it gives the game scale here, 90-minute turns. They talk about this. The base idea here, it almost feels like it's an introduction to heavier versions of the game, given that there are. It's a simplified version, but this is all that comes with it. Okay. And maybe that is why I'm feeling like things aren't as nailed down as I'd like them to be. Terrain effects are, well, the terrain key is here. The terrain effects should be over here, and we'll look over those when we think about the battle a little bit more, but we've got that over here. The counters themselves, I've kind of gone over them already. I haven't gone over the leader counters. What are his numbers? He's got 3 numbers on him, which are spelled out somewhere. They don't tell me there. The factors, Leader's movement factor can be added to units in the hex. I'm guessing that's in the same place as the movement elsewhere. The morale factor, which will be the center, can also be added to a single unit in a hex. And the combat factor can be added to a unit. Okay, so they just basically bonus a unit. Now, you use lead units in this game when you're attacking. Kind of like... Some aspects of this kind of remind me a little bit of the Avec Infini Regret. Okay. It's an I go, you go game. Setup is fixed, although there are options for a more free deployment, I think, for the Continentals in this particular scenario. The game turn, like I said, I go, you go. Movement, combat, move the turn marker. Check at the end of each turn if somebody's won an automatic victory. Otherwise, at the end of the game, you count up based on losses. Actual movement, nothing too exciting here. The movement allowance, the terrain effects chart should take most of it into account. But there's a march movement. If you're at least 2 hexes away from the enemy during your entire move, you can double your movement allowance. Terrain is there. Nothing too exciting there. There's a road movement. You can move a half movement. It costs a half movement point on the road from one road to another. Reinforcements come on the map by various setup hexes, which are spelled out there. It looks like they don't come in as a chain. They all flood in at the same time. But if a unit can't enter because it's occupied by an enemy unit, it can enter the next hex along the map edge, which counts as an extra hex further. Now this gets really weird. If that hex is occupied, it can slide down the map, paying 1 hex of movement for each until it enters, or if it expends its entire movement allowance, and then it's set up at a new entry hex for the next turn to start from. Stacking, there's no limit to the number of friendly units entering, leaving, or passing through, or stacking in a given hex. However, if more than 3 are stacked in a hex at movement or combat, all units are disrupted. Well, that's pretty bad, but it's not as bad as, eliminate the excess or whatever that most games have. Only 1 artillery unit plus any 1 other unit can attack from or defend a single hex. Any additional units in that hex will have no effect on, will not take part in the combat, but they have to retreat with any participating units. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to bring it close later, but give me more room. The game has zones of control. These are fairly standard type. You move into it, you stop moving. You can move out of it at the beginning of your movement, but then you can't go directly into another zone of control from that. Some terrain is going to block zones of control. Let's see if there's anything else here. Disrupted units may not enter an enemy zone of control during movement. You can attack units in a zone of control. Defending units in an enemy zone of control at the beginning of a combat phase they trigger attacks. They are also allowed to attack in a way that's very similar to the musket and pikes based systems. If they're not attacked, they can generate their own attacks, but it happens a little differently. It happens after, I believe. Okay. Combat phase. During your combat phase, your units can attack adjacent units. The attacking player can conduct whatever attacks they wish, but again, if you don't attack a unit, there are penalties for not attacking a unit. It's not just freely choose what you attack. You look at all the units that are going to be involved. You identify one as the primary unit. You calculate a differential of the strengths of the units that are actually involved in the combat. You roll 2 dice. One is the combat die, and the other is the morale die. Yeah, you could do them separately. You cross-index the combat die on the differential between the two forces. So we've got a differential combat system. Like you take the attacker's strength, you subtract the defender's, and you get a column from that. And then the morale die will be used as a morale check. What's kind of weird about that is it's used for whichever side needs a morale check, right? So it's like, yeah, I kind of feel like I'd rather know who's going to make that morale check. For solo, it might not matter, but if I was playing opposed, I would kind of not like it that the attacker's rolling my morale check. I don't know. It's just a personal thing, really. And then you apply the results. The results are more complicated than you would expect, especially since there aren't that many results. But anyway, the attacker has discretion as to which of his units attack. However, there is a penalty for failing to attack a defending unit that exerts a zone of control on the attacking unit. At the end of the combat phase, any such defending unit not attacked during the phase may attack any adjacent attacking unit, even one that attacked during the phase. If no attacking unit remains adjacent, the triggered defending unit may move 1 hex and then make an attack. The counterattacking unit attacks any one erstwhile attacking unit or stack. It may ignore any other adjacent attackers, and the combat factor of the counterattacking unit is doubled for the combat. So you really kind of want to soak things off because you could create a little beast there. Okay. An attacking unit is not required to attack any adjacent hex into which it could move during normal movement. It can only attack into a hex it can move in normal movement. It can only attack once per combat phase. Stacked attackers have to attack together. Stacked defenders, only one unit defends. If you recall when we were looking at stacking here. Well, they say only one artillery plus one other unit can attack from or defend a single hex. So stacked attackers kind of don't attack together, I'm guessing. This is the kind of stuff where I feel like, you know, hey, there's a contradiction there, kinda, but I can make it make sense because the artillery and the infantry exception. Otherwise, it would feel like a complete contradiction. So, where were we? A single unit or stack can target only one defending hex. If the attacking unit is adjacent to more than one, the attacking player may choose which to attack. But again, here it says C3 7.3, which is the rule I'm in. I think they mean 7.2. A little bit of a errata there. A single defending hex may be attacked only once per combat phase. If attacked from more than one adjacent hex, they must be combined into a single combat with a single lead. You determine a differential between the combat factors of the attacking you add up the attacking units. You have it if the unit is disrupted or attacking into or out of certain terrains. If it's halved twice, its strength is only 1, no matter what. You total all the modified combat factors of all the participating attacking units. You subtract the total combat strengths of all defending units, and the result is the combat differential that'll be on a column here. Okay. Like I said, you roll a die, you get a result. The results are spelled out here. Any, no effect, AR or DR. The attacker has to retreat or the defender has to retreat. All the affected units retreat or are disrupted. If the defender retreats, the attacker is allowed to advance. AC or DC. The attacker checks for, this is C for check, for a retreat, or the defender has to check for a retreat. If the primary unit passes its morale check, you apply a parenthesized result that'll be there. So we got something here like DCEX. It also says leader, which is going to force a leader loss check. The leader loss checks are baked into the combat table. If the primary unit passes its morale check, the parenthesized result. If it fails, treat it as an ARDR. Okay. AXDX, the attacker or defender loses a step. If the primary unit passes its morale check, it takes a loss and no advance is possible. If it fails the check, or if the owning player chooses, all units of the affected side are disrupted. No further effect if already disrupted. So it's kind of interesting. You take something worse, an actual casualty, if you succeed in your morale check, but otherwise you're disrupted and you retreat. If a defender retreats, the attacker is allowed to advance, but it does the loss will stop the attacker from advancing for whatever that's worth. DM is a defender route check. If the primary defender passes his morale check, you apply a secondary result. If it fails, all defenders will rout and the attacker may advance. There is actually an AM result in this. Cav charges can cause the attacker to have to rout. And then there's exchange. The primary unit on each side loses a step. No units retreat or advance, even if the defender's hex is emptied. Retreats and the SLR. I don't know what the fuck. Safe line of retreat, yeah. A retreating unit is forced to move 1, 2, or 3 hexes, normally the owning player's discretion, from its combat hex. If a unit has no option but to retreat off the map, remove it from play. It's not counted as captured, but may not return to play. I think that means it can't even be rebuilt, which is an option that happens in this. I guess. I don't remember seeing any rebuild points in this scenario. At the time of its retreat, a unit either has a safe line of retreat, an unsafe, or no line of retreat. A safe line of retreat is a path of hexes with no prohibited terrain, enemy-occupied hexes, or enemy zones of control, but you negate the enemy zones of control with a friendly unit or the ZOC of a friendly unit. That's pretty liberal. The final hex of the retreat, though, cannot be in an enemy zone of control, negated or otherwise. The retreat paths may pass through and or end in a friendly occupied hexes, even if overstacked. If the destination is attacked later, the retreated units participate in the defense. An unsafe line of retreat, this is identical to the safe, but passes through an unnegated enemy zone of control or ends in an enemy zone of control. In this case, the unit will rout from the last hex of its retreat. We'll talk about rout in a moment. That increases its retreat length. A unit may rout any number of times until it no longer has a line of retreat or retreats off the map. No line of retreat is a path through prohibited terrain or enemy-occupied hexes. The retreating unit is captured, it's removed from the map and handed to the opposing player and count towards victory conditions, and it cannot be rebuilt. Doesn't say it there, but I gotta swap batteries again. Or charge. You know what? I'm gonna charge, because I can use a break. Battery stopped at some point or another. After probably like 5 or 6 hours of just waste time so easily. Whatever. I don't remember where we were. We did the retreats. We're on losses. The first, okay, so they're on step losses. On the back of these units, they have a band, which indicates that it's taken a hit. They say red band. This one, obviously, with a red counter, that wouldn't make sense. But I think if we look at this one, no. If we look at the Continentals, they're going to have a red band, I think. Yeah. Anyway, if they have a band on the other side, that's a step loss. And the regular infantry, I haven't explained the units. These are infantry brigades. These are battalions, which are specific to Germantown itself. Well, they might be used in other scenarios as well. And then we have artillery, which is pretty obvious. There should be a cav somewhere. I know there's one here. It's probably not much. And honestly, they're probably dragoons in this era anyhow, but I'm not sure. They're Hessians. Who knows? Maybe they had some real cav. Now, the artillery and the cav have special rules about them, as do the battalions. The brigades are going to be your normal units that we deal with. So those are the two-step units, and I think the only ones. This has a bar across it, but it doesn't count. Okay. I don't know why it's there, to be honest. All right. Take a sip. So anyway, you flip the brigades and only the brigades over when they take a loss to indicate step loss. Anything else that takes a loss, I think, is just destroyed. Certainly the battalions are. If the unit if the unit is eliminated by a loss, if it has a line of retreat, remove the unit from the map and set it aside. It has a possibility to come back at that point. If it doesn't have a line of retreat, it's captured and handed to the other player, and it'll count for victory. And my battery's shot already. Of course, means I have to reset the date and time on it because that functionality jumps in the way every time. It's funny because this one was charging. I put it in that to charge. That one's more effective. This one was charging, and it was working fine when I left. I wouldn't have left if it didn't. But usually when that happens, it turns off. It stops charging fairly early. This got a significant way through. It was a lot more charged than it usually is when it fails to charge fully. I don't know what happened. Anyway, route. So routes happen on these route checks. Again, you make a morale check to see. A routing unit acts like a retreating unit, except it retreats the full 3 hexes and is disrupted at the end of the retreat. If the unit was already disrupted, there's no further effect. If a routing unit is routed again, though, it takes a step loss and gets a new retreat afterwards. Whenever a defender retreats, the attacker may, but is not required to advance a hex. Attackers. The decision must be made immediately. Defenders, disrupted units, artillery, and attackers in some terrain may not advance. If multiple attacking hexes were involved, any or all of the participating units may advance, the decision made separately for each. An advancing unit may move into a vacated defender's hex or into any vacant hex adjacent to it, as long as the advancing unit could move into that hex. They ignore enemy zones of control. If defending units rout for any reason, the advancing attackers may advance 2 hexes instead of 1. Artillery. There's only one artillery piece in this Washington's. This has 2 combat factors, one for attack and one for defense. Shown there. It has 1 step. The reverse side is the unit in ineffective state. It becomes ineffective whenever forced to retreat, but effectiveness can be recovered. It can attack non-adjacent enemy units using bombardment, and it may not advance after combat. It may not move or attack into some terrain types off the chart. For bombardment, you can't be in an enemy zone of control because then you'd be firing, to defend yourself or whatever. It has to have an attack factor greater than 0. I assume they all do on the front. Not sure why it wouldn't. But if it's flipped over, it's ineffective, and it should have a 0 at that point. As you see, it's kind of like the gun crew left or something, it looks like. Anyway. Must be undisrupted, has to have a line of sight to the target, and has to be within range of the target. The range spelled out by this number here, but on this one, I think it's 3. Yeah, so nowhere near as far. Bombarding artillery can add its attack factor to an attack by other units, either artillery or adjacent units. I'm assuming they mean adjacent to an enemy, not to the artillery. I don't know. Against a single defender. In that case, resolve the combat normally. If attacking alone or in conjunction with other bombarding artillery, that should say or only in conjunction with other artillery, do not subtract the defender's combat factor from the differential. Just use the total artillery attack factor as the differential. Double the combat factor if the target is cavalry, and resolve the attack separately against each unit in the target hex. Remember, normally you roll an attack for the, and for the hex as a whole. But here, you're getting lots of rolls at kind of, full differential, your full strength is the differential. Bombarding artillery is not affected by any combat result, but artillery that's in an enemy zone of control is. There's no facing in this, by the way. Anyway. And sometimes tactical stuff. This is kind of, I don't know, it's not that big. I was going to say it's kind of a larger scale, but yeah. Line of sight is from the center of the firing hex to the center of the target. It's blocked if any intervening hex or hexide is blocking terrain, or has blocking terrain. If the line of sight is congruent to a hex side, it has to be blocked by both hex sides. Units do not block line of sight. Terrain in the firing and target hexes does not block line of sight, but bombardment is not permitted into certain terrain types. Again, that's all going to be on the terrain effects chart. Range, the range has to be a number of hexes from the artillery less than the artillery's range, sure. Okay, special rules for cavalry. And again, this is the general rules for the system. Cavalry operates just like infantry, except it must not be dragoons. It always has one step unit. The reverse side represents the unit in an ineffective state. It becomes ineffective whenever forced to retreat. It may recover effectiveness. Its combat factor is doubled when attacking a disrupted defender. It's allowed to charge. We'll get to that. It has to retreat 3 hexes whenever it retreats, and it's affected differently by certain terrain types. A cav unit can charge in lieu of regular combat. You make this choice, this gets a little confusing. Make this choice before starting the cav unit's move. The unit may start in a stack, but may not be overstacked. Stacked cavalry units may charge separately. No attack other than a cav charge may be made against the same unit in a single combat phase. More than one cav unit may charge a single defender. The charges are resolved separately as an exception to 7.3. What's 7.3? Normally you mass an attack of all the units. Here, cav is going to charge always separately. Each charge, is that by? Yeah, stacked cav charge separately. Yeah, okay. The unit must move 1 or 2 hexes to its target. It may start in, enter, and cross clear terrain only. It may not enter a friendly occupied hex other than its start hex, so you can't stack when they once they hit. Before resolving the combat, make a morale check for the cav. If it fails, it's disrupted. If it passes, make a morale check for the target unit unless it's an infantry and square. If it fails, it's disrupted. If it's an infantry unit, it may form square. We'll get to squares here, but it kind of feels clunky the way it's worded. Use the cav charge factor as its CF. Okay, we haven't talked about something on cav. We don't have a picture here. Here we do. So there's a charge factor here. That's going to be its combat factor when it's charging only. This will be doubled against a disrupted opponent, just like regular factors would be. When resolving the charge, treat all DR, DC, and DX results, effects on the defender, as if they're DMs, which is the route check. If the defender routes, it also suffers a step loss in addition. Any other result, no defender treat any other result. No defender route, EX, NE, or any A result as if it's an attacker route check with an attacker retreats if they succeed the check. Resolve the AM in the same way as if it's a DM. If the defender routes and the cav is still effective, It may advance 0, 1, or 2 hexes and conduct another charge. And you can keep doing this as many times as you don't end up, what is it again? If you don't end up ineffective. Yeah. You could be disrupted and still go, I think. If the charging cavalry is ineffective, though, at the end of the charge, unless it's already ineffective, in which case it's still ineffective. I mean, it doesn't recover. Squares. Any hex with an infantry unit in it can form a square at the beginning of its movement phase or during a cav charge. A disrupted unit may form a square, but the cav will be doubled when attacking it anyway. When the square is formed, place the square marker on it. Treat all units in the hex as being in square. Units in square may move 1 hex per movement phase. Make a morale check if they enter across any terrain other than clear. A failure will be a disruption with no additional effect. The square can be removed at the beginning of the next movement phase. Only the infantry units forming the square may participate in combat. Infantry unit forming the square, so the top unit in the hex or whatever. The units stacked with it may not participate, but they're affected by the combat results. A unit in square does not make a morale check when charged by cav. Add 2 to the unit's combat and morale when attacked by cav, charging or not. Attacking units other than cav, though, add 2 to their combat factor if the unit is in square. Against the unit in square. If the unit in square attacks, it loses 2 from its combat factor. So, I mean, reasonably, it's only really effective against cavalry. There's not a lot of cav in this scenario, so probably won't see much of it. Leaders are key generals who enhance unit abilities. They can move alone up to 12 hexes. That's not written on their counter. These are modifiers to the unit they're with: attack, morale, and movement. They pay 1 movement point for any kind of terrain, but can't go through prohibited. They may not enter an enemy zone of control unless there's a friendly unit there. They may leave enemy zones of control freely and are not limited to 1 hex movement like a unit would be. They don't count for stacking. Any and all leaders can stack freely with any friendly unit. Leaders have no zone of control. Their factors can be applied to a unit in the hex if the unit belongs to the same formation. Formation of A is all formations in that army. The leader's movement factor is added to all units in their hex, but the leader must move with those units. A disrupted unit may enter an enemy zone of control when accompanied by a leader. Normally you can't do that. You can't attack with a disrupted either, but you can if they have a leader. The leader's morale factor may be added to 1 unit, but that unit will still fail on a morale check of 6. 6s are always bad, 1s are always good for morale checks. The leader's combat factor may be added to 1 unit, but not to bombarding artillery or skirmishing units. I've already talked a little bit about these battalions here. They are skirmishing units. Skirmishing units are not at all defined in these rules, but they're referred to, which is a little goofy in my opinion. Accompanied disrupted units are not halved when attacking. So again, like basically they semi-rally a disrupted unit without actually affecting the disruption. They make it effective. Leaders retreat with stacked units. They become ineffective after a retreat. I'm assuming, yeah. There's a, hey, look, here's my leader, and he has no values, just like other ineffectiveness. If the stacked units are eliminated, the leader must retreat to the nearest friendly unit. If unable to do so, he's captured. If a combat result includes leader notation, roll another die for each involved leader. On a 5 or 6, the leader is killed and removed from the game. Now, this seems to happen on a die roll of 4 across the board. And I think it affects both leaders, like both sides leaders, if they're both there. Okay. Recovery, disruption and recovery. Disrupted units are marked with a D counter. This battery's dying. It has some strange values on it. kind of a star, a -2, and a V. Let's look at those. It has no zone of control. It has a variable movement allowance. Each time it's to move, you roll a die to determine movement allowance, add 3 to the die roll for units who have a movement allowance greater than 6 to begin with. But no matter what, they will not exceed their printed movement allowance. The rolled movement allowance can be doubled for march movement when you're far from the enemy. Not that far. Can't enter an enemy zone of control, except with a leader. It's halved when attacking, except with a leader. It cannot advance after combat. Excuse me. Its morale is reduced by 2, but still passes a morale check on a roll of 1. Remember, 1s are always good, 6s are always bad, is what I say. It has to retreat at least 2 hexes if forced to retreat. You can recover from disruption at the end of any subsequent movement phase if the unit was eligible for march movement during the phase, i.e. it stayed a couple of hexes away from the enemy. It'll recover automatically. It doesn't actually need to march. If not in an enemy zone of control and not eligible for march movement, it makes a morale check and is able to pass and recover. If you're in an enemy zone of control, you can't recover, though, is how I'm reading this. Step recovery. The exclusive rules state how many lost steps you're able to recover. This is done during the owning player's movement phase. One replacement enables a reduced 2-step unit on the map to recover a lost step. The unit must be eligible for march movement, but need not. It may recover from disruption and or ineffectiveness simultaneously. Alternatively, one replacement step allows an eliminated but not captured unit to be returned to the map. The unit enters the map that turn as a reinforcement at a location specified in the exclusive rules. An ineffective artillery cav or leader operates and recovers in the same way as a disrupted unit. It can recover from both simultaneously and step losses as well. There is one kind of tricky thing here, which is if someone is retreated off the map, I don't know if they're eligible for step recovery to come back. The way the wording is makes it sound like they're not, and I haven't decided yet. We made it through this set of rules. I'm going to get to the exclusive rules, but I'm almost out of battery, and I want to stop because of that. Everything charged now. Now, because I don't think I have multiple games in this series, the Musket and Saber series, whatever, and I also don't know the quick play rules may be different from whatever's used in Saratoga. I don't know if that's like a full game or something. We're gonna just do the scenario rules in with this and treat it as a singular thing. We get the historical information here. Washington trying to undermine the Philadelphia holding that the Brits are holding. Essentially, this campaign, I don't know, this is too early. Essentially, the Brits get forced out of Philadelphia, but not here. Anyway. Okay. Terrain is going to be key to the victory conditions. All standard rules apply, including the optional rule to convert EX to a DR result. That's not in here. I'm adding it, whatever it means. If I get an EX, I can take it as a DR instead. I guess the attacker can let the defender push away, because the EX result is, and it does make sense, I think, for the period. EX is an exchange. Both units lose a step of their primary units. A DR would be the attacker retreat or defender retreat. I think that option has to be in the defender's hands, that they decide to give way rather than holding out and fighting. It's the only way that makes sense. But again, it's not in this rule set. It's really weird because this is the only rule set that comes with the game. But, I mean, presumably the non-quick play rules have that option in them. These do not. And I don't know, they're willing to put 8 pages of rules in, so like Montrose had 8 pages of rules. much of which was taken up with designer's notes and the like. There's nothing of that sort in here. I feel like these quick play rules were not well thought. What the fuck is that? Sounds like somebody playing with a manhole cover or something. Anyway, as I continue to waste time in my life, not that I find this as such. I just mean in front of the computer, you know. The game's going to go up to 9 turns, but it can end early. First turn is going to be a fog turn automatically. Fog affects movement. The colonial player will go first. The Brits cannot move more than 1 hex on turn 1. Their leaders can move normally, but see 15.5. Wonder what that is. That's something that doesn't appear to have much about leaders. Has to do with fog. I guess movement of units in fog, which might limit them. We'll see what that says. Setup. The Brits set up in fixed locations for the most part. For all play purposes it is. While the Continentals show up at fixed entry hexes, except for Washington and the artillery, which I can put with any of the other commands. Optional free placement. We're not going to play with this. Formations can enter in any hex. Doesn't say entry hex, so I don't know. And anything happening after 6:30 a.m. you write down and secretly. Okay. The Colonials win the game if at the end of any British combat phase, a colonial unit was the last to occupy the market square, which is here, or any of the British camps, which run to here and here. They've got little stars on the map to help you set things up, which, given that they're hex numbers, I don't know if that's all that necessary, but the British win a major victory if there are no colonial units on the map at the end of the game. I guess I don't know, because there's the recuperation, but I don't remember. Oh, there we go. If neither player wins a major victory, or if both win a major victory, and yeah, that's possible. Right? A colonial unit could move through one of these last, and then the Brits eliminate that last unit, but aren't able to recapture one of their hexes. It seems highly unlikely, but it is feasible. The player with the larger total of victory points wins. When the totals are equal, the game's a draw. When adding victory points for eliminated units, each step counts as 1 victory point. Reducing 2-step units do not count toward victory point. Now, this is interesting because they're talking about eliminated units, whereas this only seems to indicate victory points for captured units. Remember, eliminated units can come back under the rules, under the base rules. Battalions. Battalions, and that's these little guys here. They're not the only ones. They have lots of little symbols instead of one big bar. And on their other side, they have what looks like a reduction. Very interesting. I was not expecting that. I was expecting them to be 1-step units. Okay. Maybe these? They seem to have 2 steps as well. Okay. A battalion functions like another infantry unit with the following exceptions. It becomes ineffective if forced to retreat. Okay, that must be the ineffective side. The stacking limit is increased to 4 units in a hex if at least 1 battalion is stacked in the hex. And they can add their combat strength to that of any one other unit in the hex for combat purposes. The battalion may be the primary unit if you so desire. Step recovery, a reduced 2-step unit can replace its lost step during a movement phase if it meets the requirements of 11.1 and passes a morale check. Eliminated units, 2-step or battalion, may not be replaced. 11.1 is just a disruption recovery. So we don't have to worry about there being points or anything for step recovery. Okay, so I'm guessing eliminated and captured units both count as victory points. And we're not going to pay attention to any differential in them, even though these rules said to. Light infantry. Some units will have an L on them. Well, I don't see any Brits with it. Wait. It's over here. It's in that little corner there. Wow, that's going to be hard for me to see. It says appended to its movement allowance. That's not movement allowance if that's where it is. Fuck. And I'm not sure I could see it if it's on these with their dark print. Well, those do not have it. Yeah. The only L I see anywhere is not where they tell me it's going to be. Of course, it might be... I expected there to be British lights, but it looks like it's just militia that have that. All the pale colored stuff is militia. Okay, with an L appended to movement allowances, light infantry behaves like normal infantry in all ways with the additional capacity of skirmishing. A unit can attack, I bet you that's what made the noise, it's my garbage truck. A unit may attack an adjacent enemy unit normally, or it may skirmish attack. Skirmishing unit must be able to enter the defender's hex during movement. Skirmishing does not count as an attack. Does count as an attack for 7.2, whether or not the enemy unit gets to counterattack all over your ass, and may not be combined with non-skirmish attacks against the same target. But artillery may bombard the target. Use a light unit's movement factor as if it's its combat factor. Non-light defenders can use a defensive strength of 0. This is weird because there don't appear to be any lights on the those are leaders on the British side. So why have that in the specific rules? I don't know. But I sure the hell don't see any L's in the next to the movement allowance on anything. Where was this? I guess light defenders would also use their movement allowance to fight back. No terrain effects apply. Treat all A or EX, all effects on the attacker basically, as no effect. Treat all DX or DM as DR. So you're not going to do a lot of harm to people. You can push them around. Ignore all secondary results. Skirmishers may not advance after combat. Then there's Rifleman, a unit with an R appended to its movement allowance. Wow, I didn't see any R's at all while I was looking. First of all, again, there's nothing on the movement allowance, okay? And there were no R's here. Well, I don't think there are any. You would think the Jaegers would be. Oh, wait, they are. It's that fourth thing. There was a fourth little block on this. Most of these, well, the other two battalions only have 3 little blocks. This one has a fourth one with an R. So the Jaegers are the only riflemen. Don't really feel like, you know, if you're doing specific rules, it could call out the units or whatever. Because for this particular game only, I guess it, you know, reduces some cut and paste capability if you do it that way. If it has an R, that's the Jaegers. And I guess movement allowance is the picture of the unit there, is what they mean. Like that big, what looks like an aircraft carrier. That's their movement allowance. Because that's where it is a rifle infantry. It's a light unit with an additional capability of skirmishing against a unit 2 hexes away. The intervening hex must be unoccupied. The rifle unit must be able to move into the intervening hex and must be able to skirmish attack the enemy unit from that hex. A DR result automatically disrupts the defender. It may choose to retreat. Now, DR doesn't normally disrupt, right? All affected units retreat if the defender retreats. Yeah, there's no morale check normally, but here the riflemen actually cause a disruption as well because their firepower is more effective. Colonial militia. Now, these happen to be all of the skirmishers except the Jaegers, it appears. And I'm a little confused that these are not like lights or something, because they feel kind of like skirmishers there. Colonial militia may have the following. They may not enter an enemy zone of control unless a morale check is passed. Remember, these are the guys who can skirmish. They have to be next to it to skirmish. If the check fails, movement ends when the last non-Izak is entered. They're treated as light in woods. They are all light. May skirmish attack from woods and may enter an Izak in a woods hex. I don't know what to say about this. It feels like these rules are really a fucking mess. Like, they just don't feel tailored to this scenario. They're eliminated if routed when reduced. Okay, so all my militia are the only lights that I have, except the Jaegers, which are light riflemen. But they're the only ones with that L marking anywhere. And I don't know, I'm assuming they're always lights because they have that L. But I'm guessing that there are pieces that are not in this. I don't know, maybe they are. Maybe they are. Maybe there's something else here. Yeah, I don't see anything. I got no idea. I got no fucking idea. This is beginning to feel like a Decision Games game to me. Like, you know, the stuff from the 90s, which wasn't as bad as like 3W and stuff put out, but yeah. Fog. At the beginning of each colonial combat phase, roll a die, and I'm almost out of battery, and compare the result to the range listed on the TRT. I don't know what the fuck that is. That's the TEC. This is the CRT. The fuck's a TRT? Oh, turn record track. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, let's use abbreviations nobody uses. I guess it's pretty common for Decision. If the result falls within the range, it's a fog turn. If it's outside the range, it's a clear turn. Flip the turn marker. Once it becomes clear, it remains clear until you hit the last couple turns, 1530 here. Fog can show back up. And then in 1700, it's guaranteed. But I think that's actually twilight, to tell you the truth, rather than fog in that case. Clear has no effect on play. Fog affects movement and changes the effects of some terrain types. See the box in the map for details. We've got a whole list of fog effects here. I got to change batteries before I go into them, and that means setting the date and all that crap. Rules. This is going to be a first look at this stuff along with the Chew House here. So let's take a look. Roll one die for each unit or leader at the beginning of its movement. Infantry and artillery movement allowances are limited to half the die roll. Leaders and cav to half the die roll plus 3. That's a little different from the disordered or whatever. March movement may not be used except when you're using road movement. Cav can't charge. Terrain effect modifications. Road is down to 1 movement point per hex. Light woods are treated as deep woods, which we don't have on the map, I think. I don't see any in there. Hills +2 to the combat factor of any unit on a hill attacking or defending, unless at least one opponent is also on the hill. And brook is treated as a stream. Again, we got stream and brook here. We got stream and creek here. We don't have creek here. We're going to guess that a creek is a brook. Don't know. To me, if you had to ask me, I would say a stream is bigger than a brook. I don't know. I don't know. Stream, creek, brook, they all sound the same. The Schuylkill River, on the other hand, is real, but yeah. But that counts as a creek, as far as I can tell. Anyway, maybe it's towards, there's not much there. I don't know how big it actually is, but I mean, it's called a river, for real. Okay, where else are we? The Chew House Garrison. That's this hex. It's got like a bastion in it. A British or Hessian formation, infantry battalion. That's these little things. No, these are the Hessians. Oh, wait, do I have more Jaegers? No, that's Hessian Grenadiers. These are my Tories, the Queen's Rangers. Okay. A British or Hessian infantry battalion. And now I have to think, luckily these say brigade on them, but I have to think which is bigger, brigades or battalions. I always have trouble remembering that. Just, I don't know why. In the Chew House, at the end of its movement and not in an enemy zone of control, can convert the house into a bastion. Put a square marker on the unit. The squares are on the opposite side of these. When it is in square, its capabilities are altered. See the box on the map for details. Okay? It may not move or attack. It has no zone of control and does not trigger an attack if in an enemy zone of control. It may not exit the square if in an enemy zone of control. It may not be assisted by a leader. It may be attacked only by only one colonial infantry unit per combat phase. The unit may be assisted by a leader and or battery. And or by artillery. That could be multiple, but I only have one. It may be attacked by artillery only if the artillery is stacked with an attacking infantry unit. Roll one die before resolving combat. If the result is equal to or less than the artillery attack strength, add its strength to the attack. Okay. It ignores all combat results except DMs and DX. Treat EX as AR. So on an exchange, the attacker doesn't push the attack. All right. Colonial ammunition shortage beginning in 930. And we've got that written here, ammo 1. Yeah. The British player may make morale checks for the number of colonial units indicated on the TRT, turn record track. Select that number of undisrupted colonial units, any units anywhere on the map. Make a morale check, use the unit's printed morale without any modification by a leader. If it fails, it is disrupted. Remember, a leader can kind of fake the disruption. And here we got designer's notes. Its sister game is First Saratoga, musket and saber system into pre-Napoleonic, relative shortage of trained light infantry, slower pace of movement, but not killing, owing to line formation in addition of battalions, a standard rule in the parent system, but a newcomer in quick play, allowed presentation of small but high quality units without forcing them into historically large formations. I feel like kind of a half-assed job was done here in terms of development. Some things like referring to an optional rule that doesn't exist here. Yes, I can pretend I can understand it. And referring to, what else was there? The way, the L's, which are all on the militia, and all the militia have an L on them, but they have separate rules for militia versus skirmisher type units or light infantry units, is disturbing. These may be rules that were taken from something else. What I notice here is we got a design for the system and the scenario of Chris Perello. He's the system designer here. We have no developer on the credits for this little game. Okay. You already know my objection to there not being a developer. In the main game, we have Chris Cummins as developer. I think that's Doc. I think I met him. I know a buddy of mine came across with the feeling that he was like really creepy. So I'm not sure. Like, he just seemed like a wargamer to me, but whatever, But anyway, and was very disturbed with his tendency to pick up games that had sort of a high, like hunted out games with a high resale value to reissue them. And personally, I think that makes perfect sense. So things like A Mighty Fortress and stuff, which, whatever. But anyway, I suspect if there was no developer for the scenario itself, there's a bit of a problem here. Look, sure, he knows the system and whatnot, but there's got to be someone who's standing in the way even of individual offerings like this. Now, maybe it was offered in some other format or whatever, and there's a reason for the mess that happened in the production, but I really believe that the developer stands there as the person protecting the company reputation from publishing games that have serious flaws in them, and protects to some extent the eventual players, making sure playtesters are appropriate and whatnot. There's just no way that, this is a fairly small and simple offering here, that someone wouldn't have mentioned, hey, these things don't make sense, the things that I caught, right? And yeah, you need a developer who arranges for that. You can't just say, we'll put out this offering as something separate, but we've already worked through these, and we're sure there won't be a problem at all in the specific rules for a game. Yeah, that doesn't quite work. And I think things like, maybe it doesn't make sense to have these things sitting here on the map as the only place where that information is. Maybe it would be better to put the combat results table or the terrain effects or something there. Speaking of which, we haven't looked at the terrain effects. Clear hex, normal, light woods. Attackers halved attacking. Into if attacking across a clear hex side. Blocks artillery line of sight. Deep woods, which only happens in the fog. Only infantry can enter. Must stop after entering. Only infantry may attack. Into center field is halved according to, combat factor is halved, attacking into or out of. Zone of control is blocked in or out. Line of sight is blocked in, out, and through. That's interesting. Like, you can't fire at stuff in the woods with artillery. Road hex works as expected pretty much. Hill, same as clear, blocks line of sight unless both observer and observed are also on a hill. So I wouldn't be able to see from here up to the hilltop. That's how I read it. Which I believe. Light woods on a hill blocks line of sight between hills. Which is weird, right? Light woods blocks artillery line of sight unless artillery is on a hill hex. Yeah, so like artillery that's up on a hill can see everything down here, but artillery down here can't see that hill. That's not the way line of sight works. If I can see you, you can see me, unless we've got periscopes or something, you know. I always hate games that write it in a way that ends up being the case. I will simply fix that myself. Stream, infantry, and cav +1 movement point to enter. Artillery must stop after entering. Okay. Streams are actually in the hex. You know, this may be something that just doesn't exist in the game, because it's just this. All combat factors halved attacking into or out of. Brook, treat as a stream for movement in fog turns. Ignore in clear turns. Okay. Now I've got a problem. Okay, we got a difference here. Wait. There's a difference. Brook is in this game. Well, I can't fucking tell. This is a brook. This is a brook. This is a stream here. So the pale stuff is stream, then it gets smaller and turns to brook and darker. Okay. My battery's almost dead. Buildings, a movement point to enter. Infantry, defending the hex, add 2 to their combat factor. Got buildings here, I guess. Gotta be careful that tobacco doesn't become buildings. And the bastion, treat as a building in less garrison. Okay, and then it has that special role. And I guess I swap batteries and load this up. I don't know, you know, it's a little smaller than the Napoleon at Waterloo free game that SPI put out, but it's also significantly more complicated and may have some interesting facets to it. We'll see.